we're back to the more fitnessy type content. Today we've got a glute focused lower body workout. I'm going to talk you through all the exercises individually. I also want to talk a bit about how I structure my workouts, my lower body workouts in particular, and just kind of how to get the most out of them. So I'm going to do that towards the end, so hopefully you will find it really helpful. Getting straight into the workout, the first exercise I did for this one was sumo deadlifts, which are definitely one of my favourite lower body exercises. I spoke quite a bit about these in my last glute workout that I posted, so I'm not going to go into too much detail again because I'll just kind of be repeating what I said the last time. But basically sumo deadlifts are the same sort of movement as a normal deadlift, but it's just your stance is a little bit different. So you want to have your feet a little bit wider, probably like a little bit wider than shoulder width, and you also want to have your toes turned out a little bit, and that's just going to put a lot more focus on the glutes and the hamstrings than a normal deadlift. The main thing to focus on with sumo deadlifts, as with any other type of deadlift, is keeping your spine neutral so that your back stays nice and straight throughout the whole movement, and that just takes away any strain from your back and also reduces the risk of injury as well. You want to really push through your feet to make sure that your legs are doing all the lifting, and again it's taking any strain away from your back. So really push through your feet. I think I mentioned this in the last video, but I like to kind of see it as pushing the floor away rather than lifting the bar up, if that makes sense, and that just kind of really helps me to feel it in my legs and my glutes. I always do 4 sets of sumo deadlifts. So the first set I just kind of do a bit of a warm up with a lighter weight, and then I do 3 working sets with a kind of more challenging weight for me, and I go for 6 to 8 reps on each. Next exercise I did was a leg press, and for a leg press I like to go for a sort of high wide stance. Again, that just kind of puts a bit more focus on your glutes than a sort of like normal stance. And one thing to kind of focus on with leg press is making sure that you're getting a full range of motion. So basically that just means that you're bringing the weight right in before you push it back out. You see a lot of people on leg press especially doing a weight that's kind of way too heavy for them. They'll kind of bring the weight down, their legs will only be bent a tiny little bit, and then they'll push it right back up again, which is obviously making the movement a lot easier because you're not getting as deep as what you should be, and it's taking the work away from your muscles. They're not working as hard as they should be. So just kind of make sure that you are bringing the weight right in before you push it back out. So I did 3 sets in total on leg press. The first 2 sets I just did normal sets, 10 to 12 reps on each one, and then for the last set I did a drop set. So that's just basically when you sort of like reduce the weight throughout the set. I started on 120 kilograms. I did 6 reps on that, then I took it down to 100, did 6 reps on 100, took it down to 80, 6 reps at 80, took it down to 60, 6 reps at 60, and then took it down to 40 and did a final 6 reps. And you do that without having any rest. So as soon as you've done the 6 reps, you drop it down and go straight into the 6 reps on the lighter weight. It just kind of adds a little bit of intensity to the exercise, makes you work a little bit harder, and yeah, that's what I did for leg press. And obviously you don't need to do the exact weights that I mentioned, you can do it to kind of suit your ability. Okay, then I did Romanian deadlifts, or RDLs. Again, these are another one of my favourites. I don't know what it is about them, but I really enjoy them. I do these with dumbbells, as I personally find that works better for me, but you can also do it with a bar. Try both and just sort of like see which one you prefer. It can be quite a difficult movement to master, but once you've got it, it is one that does work really well for your glutes. So I definitely recommend taking the time to practice it because, like I said, it is really beneficial. So Romanian deadlifts are a hip hinge movement, which essentially means that all the movement is coming from your hips. So you want to push your hips back sort of as far as your body will let you. You'll really feel the stretch down your hamstrings. Once your weight's at the bottom, you want to drag your hips forward and bring the weight back up. Same as the sumo deadlift, you want to make sure that your spine is kept neutral and your back is nice and straight, just to avoid placing any unnecessary stress on your lower back, just to avoid any injury. Try and think of the movement as your hips moving back and forward rather than you moving the weight up and down. and then that can kind of really help you to master that hip hinge. Another thing that personally helps me kind of get that hip hinge movement is pretending that I've got a wall behind me with a button on it, and I'm needing to push my hips back as far as I can so that my bum touches that button. So yeah, just really focus on pushing your hips backwards as far as you can, and then that'll help you to master the movement. To feel these a little bit more in my glutes, I like to really try and squeeze my bum when I'm in this position. It can be quite difficult to do, definitely. It took me a while to kind of get it. When I'm going to touch on this a little bit later on, but when you're in that position, that's when your glutes are kind of working. So by squeezing them, you're just kind of making them work that little bit harder. For RDLs, I always go for 3 sets, and I kind of go for anywhere between 8 to 12 reps on these. Next up, we've got triple contraction glute bridges. These are a bit of a newer one for me. I tried them out during lockdown when I was doing home workouts, and I really enjoyed them, so I decided to keep them in my plan back at the gym. So these are the first sort of glute isolation exercise that we've got in this workout, which basically means they're an exercise that are only targeting your glutes. For the basic movement, you're going to be lying flat on the floor. I've put a band around the top of my knees just to make it a little bit harder. You want your feet to be kind of directly under your knees, weight resting on your hips, and you're just going to push your hips up, squeeze your bum at the top, and then bring them back down. The triple contraction just basically adds a little bit of extra intensity and makes your glutes work a little bit harder. What you're going to do is you're basically just going to pulse sort of 3 times at the top of every rep, which you'll see in the video. I find that this one really burns. I feel like people think that glute bridges are quite easy compared to like stuff like hip thrusts, but by adding that triple contraction, it definitely makes them a lot harder, and like I said, it always really burns. By the end, my glutes are always on fire, and I do tend to see people in the gym going quite light on these, like really light dumbbells, but you can actually probably do a lot more than what you think. So for these, I had a 20kg kettlebell on my hips plus the band, so definitely try and go a little bit heavier if you can, and really try and push yourself with these. You'll probably have seen from the video that I had my toes up for the majority of the reps. That's just something that you can do to help to feel it in your glutes. For these, I do 3 sets of these as well, and I do 8 to 10 reps. 1 rep is kind of up to 3 and down. The last one I did in this workout was cable abductions. Again, this is kind of like a newer one for me that I've just started doing since coming out of lockdown, but I've been absolutely loving them. I think they're probably like definitely one of my favourite exercises at the moment. It's one of those exercises that looks really easy, but once you get into it and you've done a few reps, it really starts to burn and you can really feel it. You probably want to go fairly light on these, bring the cable right down to the bottom and attach the ankle strap attachment. If your gym doesn't have an ankle strap, you can just use one of the little handles and sort of like put it over your foot. I like to have a very slight bend in the knee of my working leg on these, just because I feel like it works quite well for me. But yeah, you don't need to do that. You can do it with a straight leg if you feel that a little bit more. Just kind of play around with it and see what works best for you. You're just gonna lift your leg up to the side, really try and squeeze your bum, and then bring it back to the middle. You really want to try and squeeze your glutes as you're lifting up to the side with these. I just find that this is quite a nice one just to like finish off workout. Like I said, it does burn quite a lot, so you kind of get that little like burning sensation just to finish off, which I really like. So yeah, for cable abductions, I do 3 sets of these again, but I do go for a bit of a higher rep range, and I go for 10 to 12 reps on each. And that's the full workout that I did. I know it's only 5 exercises, but I feel like if you're working hard enough, then 5 exercises is definitely enough, especially for your lower body. I mean, obviously, like if you're not really pushing yourself and you're not trying hard, then 5 exercises isn't going to be enough. But if you're like really putting in 100% effort and you're trying to progress your weight and you're like really challenging yourself, then 5 exercises is definitely enough. This workout usually takes me about an hour and 15 minutes. I'm always struggling to walk a little bit afterwards, so it's definitely a good one. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I do also want to talk a little bit about how I structure my lower body workouts, as I feel like a lot of people struggle with like putting exercises together and sort of like why you would put them together and stuff like that. So I thought it'd be quite useful to touch on that, so I'm just gonna quickly run through that to finish up. So I always start any workout, lower body or upper body, the compound lifts. A compound lift is basically an exercise that works multiple muscle groups or really large muscle groups, and it's stuff like your deadlift, your squats, your hip thrusts, all stuff like that. And they tend to be the ones that you can go quite heavy on and ones that you need a bit more energy to sort of like actually get through the exercise. So that is why I always put them at the beginning. I like to kind of go into them quite fresh, so I can kind of put everything that I can into them and really try and like progress them. Then I kind of go into like medium hardness, is that a word, exercises. So ones that are like still pretty hard but not quite as hard as your squats and your deadlifts and your hip thrusts. So stuff like leg press, lunges, any type of lunge, split squats, all stuff like that kind of go in the middle. And then towards the end is when I go for my sort of like lighter, higher rep, kind of easier exercises. So like any abduction stuff, cable pull throughs, all stuff like that kind of goes towards the end. So that is the basic sort of structure of my lower body workouts. When it comes to training glutes in particular, there are 4 main movements that I like to kind of make sure are in every single workout. Including all 4 movements, just make sure that all areas of your glutes are being targeted in the workout. Just kind of making sure that you're getting the most out of it as you possibly can. I got these tips from Brett Contreras, who is the glute guy on Instagram, so just to kind of give him credit for this. So the first type of movement that I always like to include in a glute workout is a thrust or a bridge type movement. So obviously it's kind of in the name, but your hip thrust, your glute bridges, your frog pumps, all stuff like that. I always like to make sure I've got at least one of those in the workout. These movements are really good because they target your glutes sort of as a whole. If you don't know, your glutes are made up of kind of 3 main muscles: the gluteus maximus, the gluteus medius and the gluteus minimus. These types of movements targets kind of all 3 together. And in these types of movements, when you are at the top of a movement, so say a hip thrust, your hips are coming up, your glutes are contracting when your hips are at the top of the movement, which is why the squeeze is really important. The second type of movement I like to include is a squat, lunge, press type movement. Stuff like your squats, your leg press, basically anything where your glutes are sort of working at the bottom of the movement is included into this category. These types of movements target more like your lower kind of part of your glutes. Like I mentioned, with these movements your glutes are working at the bottom of the movement. So let's take a squat for example. When you come down into the squat and you're at the bottom of the movement, that is where your glutes are contracting, so that is where they're working, and then you'll push back up from there. Same with the leg press. When you bring the weight sort of in towards you and you're right at the bottom, that is when your glutes are working before you push it back. The third type of movement that I like to include is a hinge movement. RDLs in this workout, cable pull throughs and stuff like that also fall into this category. Same with these will target like the lower part of your glutes, and in these movements your glutes are contracting in the stretched position. So let's take the RDLs for example. You saw before, like pushing your hips back kind of as far as your body will let you. When you are kind of as far back as you can go and your glutes and your hamstrings are stretched, that is when they're contracting before you kind of bring your hips forward. And the fourth and final type of movement that I like to include is an abduction. So in this workout I did the cable abductions, you can do seated abductions, banded crab walks, anything where you're sort of moving your leg away from the midline of your body. These types of movements target the upper part of your glutes, so that's kind of going to help give you like that rounded kind of look at the top. I definitely think abduction movements are a bit underrated when it comes to glute training. I feel like everyone puts a lot of emphasis on hip thrusts and sumo deadlifts and all stuff like that, but I think any type of abduction will work just as well, and I would definitely recommend having at least one in every single one of your leg workouts. So those are the 4 types of movements that I always like to include in a lower body day, just to kind of make sure that I get the most out of it and I'm kind of targeting every area of the glutes that I can. So yeah, that is it for another video. I do hope that you found it helpful, and I hope that you learned something from it. If you try out this workout or any of the exercises from it, let me know how you get on, let me know how you find it, because I really like it when people message me telling me they've tried my workouts. As always, if you enjoyed the video, remember to give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back again next Wednesday with another video.